The Korean Zombie and Max Holloway is one of the most irresponsibly made matchups in recent UFC history. And it's not only a slap in the face to him, but it's a degradation to the sport and everything that he's done in his entire career. It's an abomination. And it's astounding to me that I'm hearing from the fans that know exactly what the UFC is doing, that know that he's about to go in there and take the battering of a lifetime from Max Holloway, and they are trying to justify it by saying he asked for it. The Korean Zombie asked for it. Okay, if he asked for a firing squad, you gonna give it to him? If the Korean Zombie asked to get thrown in a pit with a fucking tiger, is that a good enough reason to do it? At a certain point, okay? I don't care if an old retired fighter that doesn't care that much about their brain wants to fight King Kong. At some point, their family, their team, and in this case, his team is the one that's allowing him to go through with it. Those are the guys that are going to be in his corner. You think they're going to throw in the towel? No, they're going to let the ref step in. They're going to let him go out like a hero. But at some point, the UFC needs to put their foot down and say, no, you just took a life-changing amount of damage from Volkanovski, and you've went through shitloads of wars too and gave us dogfight after dogfight throughout your entire career. This is your retirement fight. We're going to give this guy a layup. We're not letting you go in there against the second best featherweight in the world that would 100% without a doubt be a champion if Volk didn't exist. You're not on that level anymore. You're 36 years old. You are washed up. You don't have to say this to him because it's a little bit harsh, but nonetheless, it's true. The truth hurts. You're washed up. That's an irresponsible matchup. We're not doing that. No. If Chuck Liddell wants to come back to fight Jamal Hill, is that a good idea? I don't think so. Would it sell a couple of pay-per-views? Yeah. It's a freak show. That's exactly what it is. That's what we're getting from Max Holloway and the Korean Zombie. We're getting a quintessential Max Holloway beatdown that's going to give us a highlight reel. That's why the UFC is doing it. People are dumb enough to believe that because it's a retirement fight, it's somehow an amazing send-off. Wow, what a beautiful gift. A beautiful retirement gift. You know, if you're in a regular profession and you're retiring, they usually throw you a post-work party. They get you a round of drinks. They buy you dinner. They bring presents. They tell a couple of jokes about you. And that's that. They don't usually beat your ass. You know what I mean? And this is basically what Korean Zombie's going to get on his way out. This is the gift that the UFC is going to give him. It's a pretty fucked up retirement gift, if you ask me. That's not exactly my idea of thanking a guy for everything that you've done. Hey, thank you for the wars that you've given us. Thank you for all the moments. Thank you for, blowing up the Korean market in terms of MMA. Thank you so much for all that you've done for us. Thank you for inspiring all of these Korean kids from your home country. Beautiful, beautiful work. They're all going to watch you get your ass kicked now. All right? Because we want to blow up Max's stardom even more. In Max's last performance against Arnold Allen, it wasn't like that amazing. Of course, you're not going to just wash out Arnold Allen. And Max Holloway had a really great performance. Great showing. 49-46. You know what I mean? But it wasn't exactly the kind of beatdown that the UFC can pump to the gills in regards to highlights. Like Max Holloway yelling to Calvin Kattar after landing 700 significant strikes on him that he's the best boxer in the UFC. Like Max Holloway putting such a bad beating over Brian Ortega that he's teaching him how to block mid-fight. That's what the UFC wants in this matchup. That is the allure to this matchup. And it's wrong. It's fucking wrong, man. The reason why it's okay when Max is doing it to a guy like Ortega or a guy like Calvin Kattar is because they're in their prime and it's not a fucking retirement fight. That's the difference. And a lot of people are sitting here saying, well, we have to give Volkanovski more contenders. Listen, Max lost to Volkanovski 3 times. We can't give him a guy like Ilia Topuria because if he beats Ilia, then Volk has no contenders. Well, you know what? Give Max Ortega. Ortega got beat by Volkanovski. We're not really dying to see that rematch, are we? But one rematch that I wouldn't mind seeing is Max and Ortega if you want that quintessential beatdown. You get to have both of those guys cancel each other out. Get one of them out of there. So Volkanovski has fresh matchups. And you know what you do with the Korean Zombie? You give him Bryce Mitchell. You give him a guy that's not going to batter him around for 5 rounds. That doesn't have a shitload of power either. That at most is going to submit him or land a couple of ground and pound shots. But at least that's still a fun matchup and it's not just cruel, bro. Again, there are alternatives. If you were to make Max and Brian Ortega the main event and you were to do the Korean Zombie and Bryce Mitchell as the co-main in Singapore, it's fixed. Would the Korean Zombie win that? Probably not. But if he can't beat Bryce Mitchell, how the fuck is he going to beat Max? That's another thing. He has like no chance to win this fight. It's really not that different than Khamzat Chimaev and Nate Diaz. And it's even worse because Nate Diaz was like this badass who's always talking shit and calling people out and all that. Korean Zombie is a Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Humble. You don't want to do that to him. You know what I mean? And again, the whole allure is to give Max Holloway some more highlights, to give him a highlight reel. And I think that at a certain point, the UFC needs to put their foot down and say, no, we don't do that around here. We're not just going to give some old washed up man, one of the most ferocious strikers we could possibly give him. The Korean Zombie is not exactly going to jump on Max Holloway and try to wrestle him. At least Brian Ortega could try to latch up a submission. At least Brian Ortega is still in his prime and maybe he's improved. Maybe this time he doesn't take 400 significant strikes. Maybe he only takes 250. At least there's an alternative. And then you have two great fights rather than one sad fight. Like, I'm not really looking forward to this that much. It's going to feel a little wrong watching. I already felt weird watching Volkanovski and the Korean Zombie. The Korean Zombie didn't deserve that title shot. I mean, he got a split decision win over Dan Ige, 48-47 at best for him. Dan fucking Ige, and he gets a title shot against Volkanovski. I knew that was going to be a complete washout, and while I was watching it, it was like watching a sanctioned murder. It felt weird. And the crowd was also just not going crazy at all. I mean, the kind of beating that Volk was putting over the Korean Zombie would normally warrant the crowd to actually get up out of their seats. But in this case, people just felt bad for him. It just felt wrong. And Volkanovski was checking on him mid-fight. It's probably going to be worse with Max Holloway because Max Holloway doesn't have that much power in his hands. And the Korean Zombie, a tough guy with a good chin, is going to be willing to eat all those shots. In his corner, as I mentioned earlier on in this video, the same people that are allowing him to step in there, that aren't pulling him to the side and saying, hey, man, like, this ain't right. You have kids, bro. You have a wife. Don't you want to be talking to them in 10 years and not slurring your words more than you already might be in 10 years? And this is the issue. It's like, what the fuck is his family doing, man? What the fuck is his team doing? This is a guy that's making bank on YouTube, by the way. He's one of the most successful YouTubers in the MMA space. And I just don't understand what he gets out of this other than it's a retirement fight. How amazing. Like, it's not going to be a beautiful moment at all. At all. It's like Frankie Edgar's retirement fight being against Gutierrez or Shogun's retirement fight being against Ihor Potieria. It doesn't make sense to feed these older, washed-up guys killers, let alone the second best guy in the fucking division. I mean, this might be the most horrific retirement fight we've ever seen. And again, the reason I'm making this video is because there's an alternative. And it's possible that the UFC can actually come to their senses and change some fights around, like they did with UFC 279. They could make some changes. There's a theory that the reason why they switched around the 279 card, namely the Khamzat Chimaev and Nate Diaz card, where they gave these guys a bunch of different matchups at the last minute, was because the UFC was worried about getting bad publicity for having one of their longtime beloved stars in Nate Diaz get beat to a pulp by Khamzat Chimaev. And there's an idea that maybe it wasn't just the weight miss from Khamzat that ruined the whole card. Maybe they thought to themselves, wait a second, this is bad. This is really bad. The fans aren't really dying to see this. We already kind of know the outcome. It may reflect badly on our company. And this is the kind of fight between Max and the Korean Zombie that's going to reflect badly on the company and the sport, especially on the Korean Zombie. Once again, I don't really care if the Korean Zombie is asking for it. Just because he's asking for something that is going to 99.9% chance give him one of the worst beatings of a lifetime, where he takes a overwhelming amount of brain damage, doesn't mean that it's a justified reason to do so. I understand he wants a big name, but come on, man, not Max. Not Max Holloway. You shouldn't be in there with him. You don't deserve that fight. Just because you're a big name, you don't deserve that fight, because if you're fighting Max Holloway, you need to be one of the best in the world. And you think Max is going to go out there and take it easy on him? All that's going to do is it's going to lower his stock, because people are used to seeing those Max Holloway amazing, wowing, and record-setting performances. And I'm not saying he's going to become irrelevant, but What I am saying is, yes, he would gain respect, but because he's expected to go out there and destroy the Korean Zombie, and the UFC knows that's why they're making the fight, and that's the allure to watching it in the first place, the alternative would be fist bumping the Korean Zombie in the middle of the cage, getting pity points, and posting that on Instagram and saying Max has a lot of respect for the Zombie. He didn't want to beat his ass too badly. And then all the fans saying Max is being nice. Max Holloway could also just get called someone that couldn't beat him up that badly. Wow, Max is really starting to fade. You think he wants to deal with those comments? Max Holloway isn't the biggest draw as it is. And the one thing that keeps Max Holloway a massive name at this point in his career are those performances and fights that he's having with guys like Yair. You know, that was an all-out war, a classic fight. The performance that he had over Calvin Kattar, 500 plus significant strikes. I mean, you know how many highlights we have from that fight alone? I think he landed like 130 significant strikes in round 4. Ridiculous. And so Max is going to go out there to do work. And it's not exactly like he can just be buddy-buddy with the Korean Zombie in this fight either, because the Korean Zombie's there to win. Like, if Max Holloway tries, he's going to beat Korean Zombie's ass. But if he doesn't try and he gets too buddy-buddy with them, he can get in trouble. It's still a fight. You have to defend yourself. You have to try. As I said, there's an alternative for Max. The alternative is Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega's in his prime. Brian Ortega is one of the most dangerous submission artists in the game right now. He could still find a submission over Max. That's the allure of that fight. And he could do a little bit better this time. I bet he would. But nonetheless, it's not his retirement fight, and it's not like you have no other option for the Korean Zombie. Bryce Mitchell, perfect. He has a great personality. You know, he's got a lot of hardcore fans behind him. It just doesn't make sense. At a certain point, bro, your family members need to step in. You know what I mean? And they need to tell you, listen, why are you doing this? You're not going to beat this guy. Be realistic with him. It's like, you know, at a certain point, someone that is close to him needs to be realistic with him, because I don't know the guy. He's not going to listen to me. At the end of the day, it's up to the UFC. It's up to the Korean Zombies team and his family to step in and say, you're not ready for this, and you have to accept reality. And the reality of the situation is you're not in your prime anymore, and you have no business being in there with a killer like Max. No business whatsoever. It's a bad time. You know, that's a lot of damage. And you've already taken a lot of it. You don't need any more. Fight Pillow Hands Mitchell. You know what I mean? But at least there is a chance that if the fans shit on the promotion for this fight a little bit, meaning that they push back, and if they post a Korean Zombie's going to be fighting Max Holloway post in a couple of weeks, and they try to remind us of it, maybe leave a comment saying, hey man, why can't you give this guy a different fight? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Once again, I don't care if he asks for it. That's not a good enough reason to allow him to do something that is this irresponsible. You know what I mean? You're basically giving the guy a firing squad because he asked for it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's not like I'm sitting here saying don't allow him to fight at all. But man, the UFC needs to make a change with the way they go about these retirement fights, because it's just fucked up. They constantly give these old guys that have done so much for the promotion, young killers that are trying to make a name for themselves. And in most cases, those guys are fighting for their career. You know, if Ihor Potieria, a guy that's new to the UFC, does not finish a guy like Shogun early on, there's a chance that the fans are going to say, wow, he couldn't even finish an old Shogun. The UFC is going to say the same thing, and then they're going to cut him. But in this case, it's Max Holloway, and he's thinking to himself, if I don't put on a good performance, my stock is going to decrease. And the UFC expects me to put on a classic Max Holloway performance. You know, McGregor's not going to be around this year. And they need to pump up their stars. That's what they're doing to Max. And once again, all the joy that we would normally get of watching Max Holloway put on a record-setting beatdown over someone is going to be taken away because it's the Korean Zombie, and he's basically defenseless, and his corner is already irresponsible enough to promote his behavior. And, you know, they ain't going to put the towel in. So we're going to have the referee step in, hopefully, or the doctor. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Once again, I think it's a horrible matchup and incredibly irresponsible, and the UFC should be ashamed for putting this together. And there are alternatives, all right? We could very well make Max Holloway and Brian Ortega as the main event, Ortega's taken some time off. He's coming off of an injury. I'm sure that he has enough time to get ready for this. And same thing with Bryce Mitchell. Mitchell was supposed to fight Evloev. He pulled out. I'm sure he'll be ready for this. Those are better matchups. And 2 is better than 1. Until next time.